Hi, this is Neil Scoggins with City of Refuge Community Church with this week's Bible Study Rewind. This past Tuesday night, we concluded our series entitled The Stages of Faith. And man, we've had a great time these last couple of weeks talking about the stages of faith. We've really been focusing in on 1 Samuel chapter 16, 17, and 18, peeking at the story of where David actually took out Goliath. And we discovered that the stages of faith are actually the backstage where David was tending the sheep. And we discovered that there are some sheep that many of us need to tend to. The second stage was actually the front stage. So at the backstage, you develop your faith, but at the front stage is where your faith is being displayed. It's where David was led from tending the sheep to end up confronting Goliath. He was sent there by obedience, and he was also sent there by a move of the Spirit. And we talked about there is no way that we can move unless the Spirit of God actually moves ahead of us, that gives us permission to move. And then on this past Tuesday night, we went from the backstage to the front stage and ended up at the main stage. We talked about a couple of things in 1 Samuel chapter 17. How is it that David was able to conquer this uncircumcised Philistine called Goliath? Well, a long time ago, I preached a sermon called Stand Tall, and I talked about those 5 smooth stones that David picked out of the brook in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 40. Well, we only talked about a couple of those stones on this past Tuesday night. One of those stones was the stone of perseverance. In other words, David, in order to conquer Goliath, he had to walk with the stone of perseverance. It takes faith to continue to move forward, even when you have opposition in front of you. And I shared my heart and talked about, there are times even in my own personal life that I know what God has said. I remember what God has said. I may have even read what God has said and prayed what God has said, but what God has said sometimes contradicts what I see in my life. And I have to persevere and push toward and walk in faith and believe that regardless of what that Goliath is, God will allow me to conquer that Goliath. So he had to persevere. His brothers called him conceited and said that he was trying to be a ball hog, if you will, and try to glean all of the glory for himself, which was really a contradiction of David. It's amazing how people will call you conceited when you're the most potentially the most humble person around. Maybe it's because they are conceited and frustrated, because remember, these are the same brothers that saw David get anointed in front of them. So he had to be he had to persevere through everything. The second thing that you have to do on the main stage is this. You have to walk with a sense of perspective. You have to see things. You have to see yourself, and you have to see the Goliath based on God's perspective. There is nowhere in 1 Samuel chapter 16, 1 Samuel chapter 17, or 1 Samuel chapter 18 that David called Goliath a giant. He called him either a Philistine or an uncircumcised Philistine. Many times there are Goliaths in our lives, and we need to stop calling them giants and call them over based on the relationship that we have with God. David took something so small as a stone and took out this 9-foot uncircumcised Philistine. We also talked about the fact that what used to tower over David ended up towering over it, because the Bible says that one stone, sank into the forehead of this uncircumcised Philistine, and Goliath fell down face first into the ground. And David ran and stood over the one thing that used to stand over him. When you operate in faith and you use the things of faith and you remember the power of God that is on you, the things that used to tower over you, now you will tower over it. Man, we had a great time this past Tuesday night. Please don't forget to join us every Tuesday night, 7 p.m., 3400 Roosevelt Road in the city of Little Rock. It's City of Refuge Community Church Bible Study. You don't want to miss it. We started at 7 o'clock. Last night, we went a whole 59 minutes because it got real good to me. I got real excited. I didn't shout. I shouted on the inside, but man, all of us had a great time. Join us every Tuesday night at 7 p.m., 3400 Roosevelt Road. We are City of Refuge Community Church. My name is Neil Scoggins, and this has been Bible Study Rewind.